Marcus Reed's hands were black with engine grease when the proximity alarm began its insistent beeping. He glanced up from the ancient freighter he'd been coaxing back to life, squinting against the amber glow of the setting binary suns. His repair station little more than a cluster of prefabricated buildings and landing pads. On the edge of civilized space, rarely saw visitors this late in the day. "Daddy!" Jade's voice echoed across the bay, her small feet pounding against the metal grating. "There's something coming." "It's smoking." Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and moved to the observation window. His daughter pressed her nose against the glass, her breath fogging the surface in excited puffs. At 7 years old, Jade had inherited her mother's wild curiosity and his own stubborn determination. A power combination that both terrified and delighted him. "I see it." "Sweetheart," he murmured, his experienced eye tracking the descending vessel. It wasn't a shooting star, as Jade had initially thought. The trajectory was too controlled, the descent too deliberate, despite the trail of dark smoke pouring from its port engine. The ship was unlike anything Marcus had seen in his 15 years running this isolated outpost. Sleek and elegant, with sweeping curves that suggested both speed and luxury, it bore the unmistakable hallmarks of Azurian design. The hull gleamed like polished sapphire even through the damage, and golden filigree traced patterns along its wings. "That's a rich person's ship," Jade observed with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Yeah," Marcus agreed, already calculating repair costs in his head. "Probably way out of our usual league." The vessel touched down with surprising grace, despite its obvious distress, settling onto his largest landing pad with only a slight shudder. Marcus watched as the boarding ramp extended with a soft hydraulic hiss. His hand instinctively moved to the plasma cutter on his tool belt. Not that it would do much good against anything truly dangerous, but old habits from his years in the merchant fleet died hard. The figure that emerged made his breath catch. She was tall and moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost hypnotic. Her skin was a deep indigo, darker than the typical Azurian sky blue, and it seemed to shimmer with an inner light in the dying sunlight. Silver hair fell in intricate braids past her shoulders, woven with tiny crystal beads that chimed softly with each movement. Her eyes, when they found his through the window, were a startling violet. Behind her came a teenager, perhaps 15, with the same indigo complexion, but darker hair that fell straight to her shoulders. Where the woman moved with confident grace, the girl was all nervous energy, her eyes darting constantly across the station's perimeter. "Jade, I need you to go to the house," Marcus said quietly, his tone brooking no argument. "But Daddy, now, please." "Take the back path." Something in his voice must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because Jade nodded and slipped away without further protest. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped out into the cooling evening air. The Azurian woman approached him with measured steps, her hands visible and empty, a universal gesture of peace. Up close, she was even more striking. Fine lines around her eyes suggested she was close to his own age, and there was something in her bearing that spoke of education and refinement. "Forgive the unannounced arrival," she said, her voice carrying a melodic accent that made even her apology sound like poetry. "My name is Talina Voss. This is my daughter, Nessa. Our ship experienced difficulties." "Marcus Reed," he replied, wiping his hand more thoroughly before offering it. Her grip was firm and cool, like holding polished stone. "I run this station." "What kind of difficulties are we talking about?" "Mechanical failure," Talina said smoothly. Too smoothly. "We were attempting to bypass a restricted zone and misjudged the gravitational stresses." Marcus let his gaze drift to the ship behind her. Even from this distance, he could see the scorch marks along the hull, distinctive patterns that had nothing to do with gravitational stress and everything to do with weapons fire. He'd seen enough combat damage during his fleet days to recognize it instantly. "That so?" he said neutrally, meeting her eyes again. Talina held his gaze steadily, but he caught the slight tightening around her mouth. The way her daughter shifted nervously behind her. A dozen questions crowded his mind. But Marcus had learned long ago that people on the edge of civilization often had good reasons for their secrets. He'd certainly had his own reasons for settling this far from the core worlds after Rachel died. "I can take a look," he offered finally. "Might be able to get you airborne by morning, depending on how bad the damage is." Relief flooded Talina's features, transforming her face in a way that made Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. "We would be grateful. Though I should warn you, we're on something of a tight schedule." "Aren't we all?" Marcus muttered, already moving toward the ship to assess the damage. He'd barely begun his inspection when Jade reappeared, completely ignoring his instructions. She carried a lopsided cake covered in far too much frosting, 7 candles flickering precariously on its surface. "Daddy, you forgot," she called out, carefully navigating down the ramp from their living quarters. "It's your birthday dinner." Marcus felt heat creep up his neck as Talina turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Your birthday?" "It's not a big deal," he said quickly, shooting Jade a look that promised a conversation about following instructions. "Just another year. I made chocolate cake," Jade announced proudly, finally reaching them. She looked up at Talina and Nessa with open fascination. "Are you aliens? You're really pretty. Do you want some cake? Daddy has to fix your spaceship, but everybody likes cake." "Jade," Marcus started. But Talina was already smiling, a genuine expression that reached her violet eyes and made something warm unfurl in his chest. "That's very kind of you," Talina said, crouching down to Jade's level. "I'm Talina, and this is Nessa. We're Azurians, from the Indigo Cluster. And yes, we would love some cake." Nessa managed a small smile, though her attention kept drifting to the horizon. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. 3 dark shapes were rising over the distant hills, moving low and fast, the kind of approach pattern used by ships that didn't want to be seen coming. Talina had noticed too. She stood abruptly, her hand finding Nessa's shoulder. "How long will repairs take?" she asked, her earlier calm completely gone. Marcus's mind raced, calculating odds and angles. The approaching ships were maybe 5 minutes out, moving with military precision. His station had no defenses to speak of, and the damage to Talina's vessel was extensive. He'd need at least an hour to get her airborne. Probably more. "Not fast enough," he said grimly. "Then we'll lead them away," Talina said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We won't bring danger to you and your daughter." Marcus thought of Rachel, of the promise he'd made at her bedside to keep Jade safe above all else. The smart play was to let these strangers leave, to pretend he'd never seen them. But he looked at Talina's face, at young Nessa's barely contained terror, and found himself thinking of all the times he and Rachel had needed help and found none. "There's another option," he heard himself say. "But we need to move fast, and you need to trust me." Talina's eyes searched his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw, there must have been enough, because she nodded sharply. "Tell us what to do. Jade, grab your adventure bag, the one with the glow sticks, and your tablet. Quick as you can." His daughter's eyes went wide, but she took off running without question. Marcus turned to Talina and Nessa. "Follow me, and I hope neither of you are claustrophobic." As the approaching ships grew larger on the horizon, Marcus led his unexpected guests toward what appeared to be an ordinary storage shed behind his main workshop. Talina's hand brushed against his arm as they moved, and despite the danger, despite the insanity of what he was about to do, Marcus felt more alive than he had in the 3 years since Rachel's death. "Whatever's coming," he said, pressing his palm against a concealed scanner. "You can tell me about it once we're safe." A section of the shed floor slid open, revealing steep stairs descending into darkness. Talina met his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection. The first spark of something neither of them had been looking for. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus just nodded and gestured them forward, his heart pounding as the whine of approaching engines grew louder in the evening air. The bunker's emergency lights flickered to life as Marcus sealed the entrance above them, casting everything in a pale blue glow that made Talina's indigo skin appear almost luminescent. The space was larger than it looked from the stairs, roughly 30 feet across, with reinforced walls and a surprising amount of equipment for what should have been a simple mechanic's hideaway. "Whoa," Jade breathed, her fear momentarily forgotten in the face of wonder. "Daddy, this is like something from my adventure stories." Nessa moved to stand protectively beside the younger girl, her posture rigid, but her eyes scanning the room with cautious approval. "How deep are we?" 20 feet, Marcus replied, moving to a bank of monitors built into one wall. "Give or take. Rachel, my wife, she always said I was paranoid. Turns out maybe I wasn't paranoid enough." He activated the surveillance system, and screens flickered to life, showing multiple angles of his station from hidden cameras. The 3 approaching ships were touching down now, sleek and predatory in design. Matte black hulls with crimson accents, no identification markings visible. Talina stood close behind him, close enough that he could smell something floral and exotic from her hair. "Viridian hunters," she said softly, her voice tight with recognition. "Corporate mercenaries. The worst kind. Who exactly are they hunting?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Before Talina could respond, Jade tugged on Nessa's sleeve. "Do you like card games? Daddy taught me Stellar Conquest, but he always lets me win because he thinks I don't notice." A genuine smile flickered across Nessa's face. "I notice when my mother does the same thing. Why don't you two explore the supply room?" Marcus suggested, gesturing to a door on the far side of the bunker. "See if you can find something good to eat. I know there's chocolate in there somewhere." Once the girls had moved out of earshot, Marcus turned to face Talina fully. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. "I need the truth," he said quietly. "All of it. I just put my daughter in a hole in the ground for you. I deserve to know why." Talina's violet eyes met his, and he saw the moment she made the decision to trust him. She moved to the utilitarian couch against one wall and sank down onto it with a grace that seemed unconscious. Marcus sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance despite the small space. "I was an archivist for Viridian Systems," she began, her melodic voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "For 20 years, I cataloged their data contracts, communications, financial records. I was invisible, trusted. No one pays attention to the person filing documents." Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. 6 months ago, I discovered something I wasn't meant to see. Evidence that Viridian wasn't just a mining corporation. They were running weapons to separatist groups on developing worlds, then offering protection services to the governments they destabilized, creating the disease and selling the cure. "Let me guess," Marcus said grimly. "You tried to expose them." "I copied everything to a secure drive," Talina continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I was going to contact the Galactic Trade Commission to present the evidence. But they found out. My husband, Darren." Her voice caught. "They made it look like an industrial accident. Crushed by cargo containers during a loading operation." Marcus's chest tightened. He knew that particular brand of grief, the way it hollowed you out from the inside. "I'm sorry." "I grabbed Nessa and ran," Talina said, her hands clenching into fists. I've been running for 6 months. Every time I think we're safe, they find us again. The data I carry is worth billions to them, and would destroy them if it ever saw daylight. On the monitors, armored figures were emerging from the hunter ships. 6 of them, moving with practiced precision, weapons drawn. Marcus counted at least 3 different types of scanning equipment. That's serious hardware, he observed. They won't stop until they have the drive, Talina said. Or until we're dead. Marcus studied the woman beside him, this refugee, who'd stumbled into his life on what should have been a quiet birthday dinner with his daughter. She'd lost her husband, her home, her entire life, yet there was steel in her spine, determination in the set of her shoulders. Where were you headed? He asked. When the ship got hit? Terminus Station, Talina replied. It's neutral territory, outside corporate jurisdiction. There's a journalist there, someone I knew years ago. If I can reach her, get the information published across multiple networks simultaneously, Viridian won't be able to contain it. How far? 2 days' travel. But we'll never make it now. Not with them tracking us. Talina's shoulders sagged. I should never have landed here. I've brought danger to your doorstep, endangered your daughter. Stop, Marcus interrupted. I made the choice to help. Nobody forced me. Their eyes met again, and Marcus felt that same jolt of connection he'd experienced earlier. Talina's hand moved unconsciously to rest on the couch between them, and after a moment's hesitation, he covered it with his own. Her skin was cool, but not unpleasant like touching smooth river stones, warmed by indirect sunlight. Why? She asked softly. You don't know us. You owe us nothing. Marcus thought about the 3 years since Rachel's death, the way he'd buried himself in work and isolation, convinced that keeping Jade safe meant keeping the world at arm's length. He looked at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused, hers elegant and refined, and realized how starved he'd been for connection. Maybe I'm tired of playing it safe, he admitted. Rachel used to say I had a rescue complex, that I couldn't resist helping people in trouble. That's not a flaw, Talina said, and the warmth in her voice made something inside Marcus's chest loosen. On the monitors, the hunters were spreading out across the station, their search patterns methodical and thorough. One approached the storage shed directly above them. Will they detect this place? Talina asked, tension creeping back into her voice. No, the bunker's shielded against standard scans, thermal, electromagnetic, the works. Rachel and I built it during the border wars, when pirate raids were common. It was designed to hide from much worse than corporate mercenaries. Talina exhaled slowly. Your wife sounds like she was remarkable. She was, Marcus agreed, surprised to find he could say it without the usual crushing weight of grief. Brilliant engineer, terrible cook, best person I ever knew. She got sick 3 years ago, Varantian fever. By the time we could get her to a real medical facility, it was too late. I'm sorry, Talina said, and Marcus heard genuine empathy in her voice. Losing a spouse. It changes everything, doesn't it? Everything, he confirmed. You wake up one day, and the person you built your entire life around is just gone, and you have to figure out how to keep breathing, keep moving, for the sake of the people depending on you. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, their hands still joined. Marcus became aware of small details, the way Talina's silver braids fell over one shoulder, the faint pattern of darker blue lines along her neck that might have been natural markings or decorative tattoos, the way her breathing had gradually slowed to match his own. Daddy, Nessa found chocolate bars. Jade's delighted voice broke the moment. The really good kind from Terrace 7. Marcus reluctantly pulled his hand away from Talina's, noting the flicker of disappointment that crossed her face. They both stood as the girls emerged from the supply room, Jade proudly clutching 2 silver-wrapped bars. "Can we share them?" Jade asked, her eyes bright with the excitement of having a new friend. Nessa's never had Terusian chocolate before. "Of course," Marcus said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "But save some for later, okay? We might be here a while." As the girls settled into a corner with their treasure, Nessa seemed to relax for the first time since arriving. Marcus watched as she patiently showed Jade how to unwrap the complex packaging, her earlier wariness giving way to something approaching normalcy. "She's been so strong," Talina murmured beside him. "But she's just a child. She shouldn't have to live like this, always running. Always afraid." "Neither should you," Marcus replied, on the monitors. The hunters had regrouped near their ships, clearly frustrated by their lack of findings. One was speaking into a communication device, probably reporting to whoever had hired them. "They'll set up surveillance," Talina predicted. "Wait for us to surface. They're patient predators." Marcus moved back to the control panel, his mechanical mind already working through possibilities. "What condition was your ship in?" "Before the damage, I mean." "Fully functional. I bought it 2 months ago with the last of our savings. It's fast, well shielded, but the weapon's damage took out the primary thruster coupling. Can you fly it?" "Of course. Why?" Marcus pulled up a schematic of his station's layout, overlaying it with the positions of the hunter ships. "Because I'm thinking we don't have to wait them out. We just need to get you back to your ship and give you enough of a head start." "That's impossible," Talina said, but there was hope flickering in her eyes. "They have surveillance drones, motion sensors, probably acoustic monitors too. We'd never make it 50 feet. Not if we go over," Marcus agreed. "But what if we go under?" He zoomed in on the station's underground infrastructure, the network of maintenance, tunnels that connected all the major buildings. Rachel had insisted on them, paranoid about being trapped in the bunker during an emergency. "This tunnel leads from here to the main workshop," he explained, tracing the path with his finger. "From there, another connects to the primary landing pad right where your ship is parked." Talina leaned close to study the schematic, her shoulder pressing against his. "That could work. But I'd still need the thruster coupling repaired." "How long would it take you to do it? Assuming you had the parts and the tools?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. "But Marcus, even if we reach the ship, they'll detect the power-up sequence. We'd be sitting targets." "Not if they're distracted," Marcus said, an idea forming. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." "This is insane," Talina said, but she was smiling now, a real smile that transformed her entire face and made Marcus's heart skip. "You're insane." "Yeah, well, I've been called worse." He found himself smiling back. Aware of how close they were standing, how her violet eyes seemed to catch and hold the light. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice taking on a different quality, "why are you really doing this?" He could have given her a dozen rational explanations. The right thing to do. Couldn't live with himself otherwise. For Jade's sake, to show her a better way. All of them would have been true, but none of them were the whole truth. "Because when you stepped off that ship," he said honestly, "it was the first time in 3 years I felt something other than numb. And I'm not ready to let that go yet." Talina's breath caught, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Then she reached up, her cool fingers gentle against his cheek. "In Azurian culture, we believe the universe brings people together for a reason. That even brief connections can be profound." "How brief are we talking?" Marcus asked, his voice rough. "That depends," she replied, leaning closer, "on whether we survive the next few hours. I've got a pretty good track record for survival." "So do I," Talina whispered, and then her lips were on his dock. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory. Her mouth was cooler than a human's, with a taste like mint and something sweeter he couldn't identify. Marcus's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. He felt her fingers thread through his hair, felt the soft chime of the crystals in her braids as she moved. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Marcus was intensely aware of the two young girls across the room, deliberately focused on their chocolate and pretending not to notice. "Well," Talina said, a flush of darker blue coloring her cheeks. "That was." "Yeah," Marcus agreed eloquently. "Daddy?" Jade's voice carried across the bunker, carefully innocent. "Are you and Miss Talina going to be friends?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Talina, seeing his own surprised laughter reflected in her eyes. "Yeah, Pumpkin," he called back. "I think we are." On the monitors, the hunters were settling in for a long wait, their ships forming a perimeter around the station. But Marcus barely noticed. He was too busy planning their escape, too busy stealing glances at the woman beside him, too busy feeling alive in a way he'd almost forgotten was possible. "So," Talina said, studying the tunnel schematics with renewed focus, "tell me about these tricks of yours." Marcus grinned, pulling up another set of plans. "Well, it all starts with my collection of mining drones and approximately 40 pounds of aluminum chaff." As he outlined his plan, Talina asking sharp, intelligent questions, Marcus felt the pieces falling into place. It was risky, probably foolish, but it might just work. And even if it didn't, he found he didn't regret the choice. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth fighting for. He just hoped they'd live long enough to see where this unexpected connection might lead.